Kids' brains are like a combination of intellectual sponges and a stack of blank pages. In the early years, they absorb staggering amounts of information and millions of ideas. Their brains develop fine motor control to read, to communicate, to recognise, understand, interact with the enormous complex world around them. What they don't have, for the most part, is a fully developed ability to think critically, to sort the wheat from the chaff. So the issue of who gets to write those blank pages is crucial. Parents, of course, but also teachers. A kid's teacher is their source of information and skills, and those early years are crucial in a child's development. A teacher is someone in whom a child is told to trust when it comes to learning about the world. A child trusts a good teacher to tell him or her what is true, how to do sums, how to write a word accurately, what happens when you mix blue paint with green paint. The list is almost endless. We encourage that trust, rightly so. We tell kids to listen to their teachers, and the kids expect and trust what their teachers tell them to be right. Teachers are heavily involved in writing on those blank pages, probably as much as parents once children start schools. Is it any wonder then that religions want to be involved in schools and to get those fertile, open young minds open to their ideas? If you present a magic sky man to a well-educated adult capable of thinking critically, but somehow notionally shielded from ideas of religion in his younger days, then you're generally going to get very short shrift in the absence of some very sound evidence for the ideas that you're putting forward. But if the ideas and doctrines are planted young, and the environment in which that adult develops holds religious belief as a reasonable norm, then even the brightest adult can be persuaded to put aside critical thinking when it comes to his or her chosen religion, and they can be persuaded by those means to believe that faith is a virtue. Approximately a third of publicly funded schools in the UK are now faith schools. And the reason why faiths want to be involved in schools, especially junior or primary schools, is quite clear. Embed the ideas early and you vastly improve the prospects of them sticking. Now why, I ask, does any reasonable moral person think that this sort of behaviour is reasonable and fair and appropriate? The concept of indoctrinating young children who haven't yet developed the defence mechanisms or facility to sort fact from conjecture, especially when those things are presented to them by a teacher who in all other respects is trusted by them to teach facts and effective skills, is completely objectionable. What goes on in our schools undoubtedly varies enormously, and the extent to which religion is pushed depends much on the school and the specific teachers, but they have a legal mandate to indoctrinate, which strikes me as extraordinary. Churches and schools in Britain have long been connected, but the legal framework kicked off in essence after the war. The current position is governed by the School Standards and Framework Act of 1998, and it's worth looking at the statute itself, which is a business-like document legislating all sorts of necessary and appropriate stuff: class sizes, intervention in bad schools, governance, finance, staffing, and then, like the proverbial sore thumb, sticking out horribly, are sections 69 to 71. A duty to secure religious education and the painfully anachronistic requirement in section 70 for a daily act of collective worship. Now, you could just about understand this if this was some ancient act of parliament dating back to God knows when. Deliberate pun. But this was brought in 1998. Let's have a look at it. It says, subject to paragraph 4, the required collective worship shall be of a mainly or broadly Christian character. And it goes on to say that it qualifies as that if it reflects the broad traditions of Christian belief without necessarily being distinctive of any particular Christian denomination. This was widened slightly in that act, but that's by the by. This applies to schools which are not explicitly faith schools. That's the 2/3 that aren't explicitly faith schools. Even in those places, this is the baseline. even for those schools that are not overtly religious in character or constitution. For explicitly labelled faith schools, the act of worship is more overt, as one would expect, and it depends inevitably on the faith that happens to be connected with that school, precisely what nature the act of worship has to take. And let's be clear, these schools are state funded for the most part. Even ones which don't claim religion have a foundation of Christian religion set up in them by law. Why? Why in 2014 are the places where we educate and teach our children about the world, places where teachers teach those kids about that world, is there an exception for the Christian religion? The only thing presented routinely in schools which is not based in things we can confirm, observe or prove in the real world, or at the very least demonstrate as logical propositions, is the Christian religion. This is the sort of mindset and reasoning we face. The fundamental idea is that having faith is a good thing. Faith is a virtue and religion is good for people and should be imposed upon everyone for the good of society. Faith is a virtue. One of those phrases that's repeated often enough and is cliched enough that it's considered a proven proposition without further. It is not. Definitions are important here. Theists will often try to obfuscate matters by misconstruing and mixing up what is meant by faith. There are broadly two definitions, and here they are. There's nothing wrong with having faith in the first sense. It can certainly be a virtue to trust or believe in a person or thing based on your knowledge of or love for them. Religion, however, is all about that second definition. The belief in something without evidence or proof. I can conceive of no good reason why that should be considered virtuous. It's an invitation to gullibility, to adverse influence and to unjustifiable bigotry. Why does it have a place in our schools alongside facts, information and practical or intellectual skills? Why, may you ask, does this matter? Why does it bother me enough to make this video, for instance? Well, I have young children. I had a choice of around 4 or 5 schools within a sensible mileage. Every one of them is an overtly religious school, state-funded. I took the view that that wouldn't be a big issue. It's 2014, it's a largely secular nation, and I assume that to a large extent the religious element would be lip service. And of course I can educate and talk in a grown-up way to my kids about how the world really is and how that they should tackle such matters. I'm keen not to indoctrinate myself, but to teach them how to think and to explain to them there are various views of the world and leave them to come to the sensible conclusions on their own. The reality, however, a hideous, uncomfortable parenting dilemma. My boy comes home singing religious songs, starts mentioning God in things he writes. Now, do I disillusion a child who's been provided with the false comfort of a loving God? Do I shatter the trust he has for a good teacher who, in other respects, he must and should trust to give him good information and knowledge? I don't see that I had a choice, but it's damned uncomfortable. I've had the conversations, I planted the seeds, and my son, he now knows that, for one, lots of people don't believe that there actually is a God or that the Bible is true, contrary to what he'd been led to understand, and two, that I am one of those people who doesn't. His initial response was, well, we believe in God and Jesus, meaning his school and his class. We believe in God and Jesus. His school and class are an important and fundamental part of a 6-year-old's identity. He's a bright lad. I'll keep talking and explaining, and I suspect he'll do a lot of weighing up and thinking, and presumably, as his faculty for critical thinking develops, he'll start to sort the flannel from the substance. But the point is, he shouldn't have to. The debate wouldn't even be in his head but for the school indoctrination. What right have these people got to plant their ideas and faith in young, innocent, impressionable minds, and why does the state continue to endorse it? I hope that in this video I've set the scene, shown how significant religion is in our schools today and why it's so bloody objectionable. This isn't just some minor irritation or a trivial issue. It's real and it is significant. In the next video, I will try to address some of the arguments that are put in favour of this involvement in our schools. Thank you for watching.